Okay, okay, okay. Hi, I'm here. Hello. Welcome. Well, let me scoot in a little bit more. Hello and welcome once again to the Sharkstream Book Club. I don't know why I put the flourish on it like that. You'll have to bear with me before we get started with reading this next part of Dead Space Martyr. I was handed my dinner like literally like 30 seconds prior to starting here. So I'm going to be eating that for a bit. But while I'm eating that, hi. Hello. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a good Saturday. I got to tell you, I'm having a pretty good Saturday. I have watched 2 whole movies today. I started my day out watching Happy Feet, and then went and saw Jurassic World Dominion with Natalie's parents. And I'm hard pressed to say which one is the superior film, Happy Feet or Jurassic World Zombie Mommy. Honestly, I'm not going to compare the two because that feels like that's a weird comparison to make. Is a movie about singing, dancing penguins versus a movie with a lot less dinosaur murder than I feel like there could have been. Like, okay, I thought Jurassic Park Dami Mommy was fine. Like, it was okay. It had some scenes in it that I thought that were really cool. This Therizinosaurus is like a standout character in that film. But man, it's like okay. So everybody remembers like some of the like more out there, like, and I don't want to say out there, but like the more iconic dinosaur kills over the course of the series. You know, Clever Girl, Wayne Knight getting spitted on and then ate. Fucking that one guy who got fucking torn in half in Jurassic Park 2 before he could really do anything. And I feel like Jurassic Park Damimami really kind of like pulled its punches on the dinosaur kills. Like there's one dude in like a scene who is Crisp Rat is letting him get et by dinosaurs to get information out of him, and he's got like this little guy chomping on his wrist, and then he's got this other little guy deep throating his fucking arm basically. And then like another guy who is comparatively not quite as little comes in from around the corner and clearly like chomps down on his head, but it's just like the camera doesn't really give you like, I don't know. I'm thinking about like the guy in the third movie that is like left to cry for his compatriots. It's like, someone help me. And then like a raptor walks up, snaps him neck. Also, there was a whole fucking trailer that like purported itself being like, oh, this is the whole prologue for the movie where we show these dinosaurs millions of years ago before they get fucking annihilated. And that scene isn't in the film. Also, the entire time I was watching it, I was thinking about like there's a dinosaur in here that the director said is basically the Joker. And that dinosaur is in the movie for all of 5 minutes, which is hilarious to me. But then, like I said, Therizinosaurus definitely steals the show. Coolest fucking dino in that movie. I would say, like, there's a part of me that wants to be like, oh, the movie's worth it for Therizinosaurus. But, like, it's not really. Like, it's not worth it for that. I would say try to find somebody who's done, like, a cam rip of the big Therizinosaurus scene, like, midway through the movie. And, like, watch that. Because, like, that was the vibe that I really liked in that film. I did also like the legacy characters coming back. It was good to see Grant, Sattler, and Malcolm again. See them interact again. And it's just delightful, honestly. I don't know if I would say... So, I know that, like, I talked about when Molly was on for Skyward Sword, about how I had seen Ghostbusters Afterlife, and how that movie felt like a movie about Ghostbusters nostalgia. I would say that despite the fact that this movie has the legacy characters coming back, it doesn't really feel like a movie about Jurassic Park nostalgia. That was more the first movie in the World trilogy. This one just felt weird. I don't know. I thought it was okay. I liked it just fine. I just... If I hadn't been, like, invited to see it, I don't know if I would have ended up seeing it in a theater. It's kind of the main thing. Like, I enjoyed seeing it in the theater. I thought it was, like... I don't know that I would have felt as good about it if my first experience had been on, like, home video. I don't know. I think my opinion of it would have been far more negative. But I'm glad I've got that experience, you know? Anyways, those are my thoughts on Jurassic World Dami Mommy. There was a lot of dinosaur telepathy, which felt very funny, especially when it was used in situations where it was not appropriate to use dinosaur telepathy. But what are you gonna do? I got rice. Hold on. Oh. So hello. It's book club today. I've been here for nearly 10 minutes and I haven't talked about that yet. Today's a book club day. We're going to be reading some more Dead Space Martyr. We're not going to be reading quite as much Dead Space Martyr because honestly, I'm a little tired. I mean, I've got an energy drink and I'm waiting for that to hit me. So we might see how I feel as we go along. But I'm expecting that I'm probably going to not make this stream quite as long. Just because, you know, sometimes you just want to take it easy, you know? Sometimes, for the sake of your own mental health, that's MENTOHELF, write that down. For the sake of ye own mental health, you just need to take an early day, you know? So this next part, so last time, Altman was fully brought on board the Dredger Corp operation. And he started training with the Bathyscaph, and he made a friend. And then his friend died. And then a lot of people started dying. Like, there were murders, there were suicides, and scientists are dropping like flies. And, it's not looking good for just kind of overall morale. But it's time for Altman to start investigating Hull. Now this next part, part 5, Collapse, which I know, very optimistic title. Let's see, it starts on page 237 and it ends on page 294. So it's about 60 pages, which is pretty standard for the last couple parts we've done. I am like burning through this energy drink. I'm probably going to regret that later, I'm sure. But it's pretty standard in terms of length. So we may not get through all of it. We may do like maybe an hour 15 worth of chapters and then call it a stream, maybe an hour and a half. Unless, of course, I really hit a stride midway through this stream and decide, no, you know what, I can keep going. But we'll see. We'll see. No. You know, I've never seen Happy Feet 2. I don't think I want to. I read the plot synopsis of it while I was watching Happy Feet 1 earlier today, and it just feels like the most useless sequel I've ever heard of. Like, what? Why did George Miller do that? Like, did he go up to them and he was like, hey, I want to make another Mad Max movie? And they're like, okay, but you have to do Happy Feet 2 first. He's like, ah, fuck, fine. Because that seems like that's probably what happened. It is bonkers that that's a George Miller movie. I gotta say. I want to make sure I at least finish this pork chop before I start reading. Give me a second. Oh. The fat on this pork chop is very good today. It's not very, like, tough or anything. Okay. Let's Dead Space. Oh, God, excuse me. Let's Dead Space. Let's space some deads. Part 5. Collapse. He took 2 trips and had to use the tranquilizer gun once. This is chapter 41, by the way. The first trip reprogrammed the MROVs, or the MROVs, I think is what I was calling them last time. Switched them over to robotic self-control, and the digging progressed at a tremendous pace, but he had to tranquilize the technician accompanying him before they reached the surface. The man gave him a fair amount of advance warning, growing more and more irritable and then finally lashing out. He waited to tranquilize until he was absolutely sure he was violent, and as a result, almost waited too long. Indeed, the man was trying to choke him to death as the tranquilizer took effect and his hands slowly relaxed and he collapsed. The other trip, strangely enough, was with Stevens, the psychologist, who applied electrodes to both his and Altman's readings, reading changes in their brainwaves as they descended. So I guess this means Markov agrees with me that Hendricks' mental problems might have been caused by the signal, Altman asked. Stevens smiled. How can I know what Markov thinks, Mr. Altman? He answered. Altman stayed ready the whole time, one hand on the tranquilizer gun, but like him, Stevens didn't seem to suffer any adverse effects. He just stayed crouched over his equipment, looking up at Altman from time to time and smiling. Learn anything? Asked Altman. Yes, I did, said Stevens, but I'd learn more if one or the other of us had an attack. I don't suppose you'd like to oblige me, would you? Altman shook his head. I didn't think so, said Stevens. Maybe another time, then. The next trip consisted of himself and a jovial engineer named David Kimball descending to retrieve the driller bathyscaphe, though Altman wasn't briefed until they were already on their way down. It'll be simple, said Kimball, patting a large, chrome-plated machine that had been bolted to the console just for this trip. Just a matter of a few minutes. All we have to do is direct an electrical pulse at the bathyscaphe. What'll that do? Asked Altman. It'll release the latches for the ballast chambers, said Kimball. This will cause the ballast to rush out. After that, the bathyscaphe will rise on its own. Sounds easy enough that a robot could do it, said Altman. A robot could do it, said Kimball, but Markov thought it'd be better to have us do it. Why? Asked Altman. I don't know, said Kimball. He didn't say. In case anything goes wrong, Altman added in his head. When they reached the ocean floor, they continued to move downward into the inverted cone that the robotic excavators had created. Having completed their tasks, the units now stood motionless, strange statues in the darkness. The bathyscaphe descended, the cone slowly tightening on them. He brightened the lights and turned on the vid cameras. Altman glanced over at Kimball. He seemed like he was doing all right, though he looked a little distracted, slightly jumpy. Nothing to worry about yet, thought Altman, but just to be safe, he checked to see that the tranquilizer pinged. Fuck. Also, I haven't been playing game footage this whole time. Whoops! But just to be safe, he checked to see that the tranquilizer pistol was cocked and ready. Hello, Wild Haiti. Welcome to the Sharkstream. You been down here before? Kimball asked. Altman nodded. Nothing to worry about, he said. They showed me the vid, he said. You seen that? Yes, said Altman. I had no idea, said Kimball. Do you think it'll be as bad as it looks? Trank pickle. God. Yeah, said Altman. They fell silent. Down below, they could see something, a vague shape that slowly became clearer. It was a huge structure, two tapering pillars twisting sinuously around each other and rising to a point. It seemed to be made of stone, but there was no doubt in Altman's mind that it was constructed rather than a natural phenomenon. Coming closer just confirmed it. It was covered in symbols, weird hieroglyphics unlike anything he had ever seen. They covered every inch of the object, winding downward along its body and up to the twin horns of the thing. It was massive and gave off the impression of great age. At once beautiful and vaguely menacing, it was completely alien. It had not, Altman knew immediately upon seeing it, been built by human hands. Why had it been built, and how? The stone showed no breaks or cracks or joints, as if it was a single gigantic piece, and the shape, it reminded him of something. But what was it? Then suddenly he knew. The tail of the devil, whispered Altman. Holy shit, said Kimball, awe in his voice. The symbols were either luminescent or catching the bathyscaphe's light in a very particular way. He checked the displays. The pulse signal was negligible at the moment. Probably a good thing, he thought. Do you think it's safe to get close? Asked Kimball. What is it? Wondered Altman aloud. Who made it? He moved the bathyscaphe slowly around just above it, filming it from all angles. It was the most impressive thing he had ever seen. Then he zoomed the camera in closer to record some of the symbols. He would have kept doing it, but Kimball's nerves were rising. This is freaking me out. Let's get the other sub and get out of here, Kimball said. There it was, sunken at the base of the artifact. Altman descended further, got as close to it as he could, and shone the light into the observation porthole. Even from that vantage, the inside of the cabin was a nightmare. Blood spread over the windows and the walls, smeared in odd patterns. He moved the lights quickly away before Kimball could get a better look. He played the lights along the side of the craft, looking for the signs of damage, but the air seal seemed intact. In theory, it could rise, albeit slowly. Ready? He asked Kimball. Ready, Kimball said. Altman moved around until there was no danger of hitting the marker, and then fired the pulse. It struck the driller bathyscaphe full on, an eerie electric glow fizzling along its hull. Then its ballast chambers began to empty, the lead pellets pattering down and raising in a cloud of silt. Slowly it began to rise. He watched it come, passing just a half-dozen meters away from them, and move upward. It tilted, and a disembodied arm rolled against the observation porthole. Ready or not, he thought, and then their own bathyscaphe started in pursuit. Okay. All right, let's take a quick trip over to the recap zone. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Let's go. All right, so stuff has happened already. Isn't that just such a weird thing? Sometimes in books, things happen. What a concept. Anyway, so we get a bit of a Cliff Notes version of two of the descents that Altman has gone on. It sounds like these are his first descents since oh god, what was his name? Hendrix, I think. Yeah, so since his last descent with Hendrix, this is his first go around with a partner. And true to Markov's word, Altman has been given a tranquilizer gun. Not fun, gun. Polar opposite of fun. Now, according to Altman, he has only had to use it once so far, in 2 trips. He had to trank the first guy. So, on his first trip... Twip? Am I okay? On his first trip, he had to trank the guy. Dude went nuts. Dude fucking lost it. Just complete marker madness. But on the second trip, he was accompanied by the psychologist Stevens, and Stevens managed to keep his cool. Very odd, isn't it? So, this, of course, plays into the whole thing, which I really wish there was a better way to describe this. But this, of course, plays into the whole thing where people who are quote-unquote smart are not affected in the same way by the marker. Much like Altman, Stevens does not seem to go completely Cocoa Puffs when he starts getting close to the marker, regardless of whether the signal is like actively transmitting or not. Now, for the engineer that shows you how to shoot the limbs back in the first game. Oh. So that's... I think you're talking about the dude in the second game, because the one who is just like, yeah, you can pull the blades off the dead ones. He's in the second game, actually. And then they reuse his video message in the third game. In, like, it's just... They didn't want to present, like, the bleeding out. Yeah, the guy that's bleeding out. They didn't want to come up with, like, a new narratively appropriate reason to discuss firing blades back at dudes that you tear off dead ones. So you just have Isaac be like, hey, I found this on Titan Station. It's another way that you could take these guys out. And he just shows the same fucking video. It's that's hilarious to me. What was I talking about? Okay. So the big event in this chapter, of course, is the third trip down. Because this third trip is their journey to retrieve the first bathyscaphe, the one that was taken by Dantec and the other guy. What the fuck was his name again? It's been weeks since we read that particular part of the book. So hold on. Tanner. Hennessy? Hennessy. It was Dantec and Hennessy is what it was. Tanner was the guy who did the thing, the fucking, what's it called? press conference, and then he killed himself. Right. So they're going down to retrieve the bathyscaphe that was used by Hennessy and Dantek. Because it's still down there. And all they really need to do is they just need to activate the ballast chambers and get it to rise all on its own. Now he goes down there with a dude whose name is what was it? Kimball, who is an engineer. Because it's a Dead Space book. You got to have an engineer in there somewhere. So Kimball seems to manage pretty well. We don't get any sense that he is about to totally freak out. Although Altman does admit that the pulse signal isn't quite as strong at the time that they're down there. But, more importantly, Altman gets his first real look, face to face, with the Black Marker. Now, he mentions, when he sees it, he mentions the tail of the devil, which is what, of course, Chicxulub means in Yucatec Maya. It's Yucatec Maya, right? I think so. I'm trying to remember details from, like, chapters and chapters and chapters ago that I read, like, weeks ago. And it's, of course, the Chicxulub is named for this, and, you know, he of course was talking about, like, all of the, like, natives that were, like, doing, like, the finger sign where they entwine, like, the index and the middle fingers, and it's intended to look like the intertwining pillars of the marker that taper to a point. You know, if you've played Dead Space, you know what the fucking marker looks like. I'm not about to try and, like, describe what it looks like. You've seen a marker at some point, I'm sure, if you've played Dead Space. But there it is, in all of its glory, the Black Marker. Now, the Black Marker is, and we've discussed the Black Marker previously, it is a phenomenally important artifact within the Dead Space universe, because it's the first marker that humanity actually encounters. And in fact, the intention is to imply, and not even just imply, but actually outright state, that the Black Marker is what kickstarted human evolution on planet Earth, because it is what collided with the Earth and killed off the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, which is hilarious because I watched Jurassic World Dami Mommy today. So you've got them face to face with this thing, and he can see all the symbols on it. They seem to be glowing either on their own or in the bathyscaph's light, and it's just there, and they're enthralled by it. It's thankfully, as I said, not sending out any sort of pulse signal at the moment, so we don't have to deal with anybody succumbing to marker madness, which this close to the fucking thing is particularly dangerous. But they do find Dantek and Hennessy's bathyscaphe. And said bathyscaphe still appears to be just absolutely full of blood and guts and dead bodies, which, I mean, I'm not sure that there's a reason it wouldn't be, necessarily. It's not like there's anybody else down there that could remove them or anything. But they successfully get the bathscaff booted back up, and it rises to the surface. Now, it's hard to really talk about, because something that's kind of a little bit difficult to discuss, at the very least, this early in the book, because right now it's all really still just... I don't want to say it's the calm before the storm, because things are anything but calm, but compared to what's going to be coming later, it is comparatively the calm before the storm. Something we haven't really been able to do is talk about like major connections to the Dead Space series. So far, our only real connection is Altman. And Dredger Corp to an extent, considering that Dredger Corp does show up in Dead Space 3. But it's really just Altman, Black Marker, a couple Necromorphs, and Dredger Corp. Because this particular book is so far removed from the events of the main series, it's hard to really discuss like major connections between the two. It was a lot easier with, say, Darksiders The Abomination Vault, because Darksiders The Abomination Vault features a lot of characters that are still around at the time that like a lot of the Darksiders series takes place. Death, War, Abaddon, the Council, Fury, Strife, and just like Lilith, all sorts of other people. It's easy to follow like through lines from one to the other. And I mean, I guess I feel like these recaps have been a little bit duller than a lot of the ones for like, say, Darksiders The Abomination Vault, simply because there really isn't a whole lot to talk about in terms of, like, connections to the main story of the games. All I can really do is just talk about what happened. And I mean, like, that's fine. But I'm hoping that as we get to the parts of the book that actually have a little bit more going on, that we are able to start talking about how, like, how this kind of connects with that, and so on and so forth. Regardless, that basically brings us to the close of this chapter. Kimball manages to get down to the marker without having any problems. They retrieve the first bathyscaph, and we've seen the marker. Also, very interesting to note is that it is referred to as the marker in the narration. I don't know if this is just like for our benefit, or if possibly Altman is just sort of like subconsciously referring to it as the marker. I don't recall that there's been any mention of it being referred to as the marker in any previous chapter. I would have to check. I think the only time that I can think of that it would have been referred to as the marker was during the story told by the drunk. And, you know, I'm taking a look, and I'm not seeing any use of the phrase the marker. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to chapter 42. This is getting to be a habit, Altman thought, carefully easing the chunk of rock out of the core sampler. Nobody seemed to notice. They were all too preoccupied with the interior of the bathscaph itself. The wash of blood and gore inside, the rotten, damaged bodies. Markov quickly had the area quarantined, but not before Altman had gotten away with the sample. Now he took it to his bedroom to examine it. He was certain it was from the artifact itself. It was seemingly ordinary rock, but one he couldn't identify. The bit he held had an indentation on it, where something had been carved or inflicted on the rock, but it was too small a sample to give a clear sense of what it was. Sneaking into an unlocked lab late at night, he tested it. The substance was not unlike granite, but harder, almost as hard as corundum. One face was smooth. He could see where the rest had been cut, was surprised the cutters hadn't burned out. Within the rock, he found mineral veins that struck him as too regular to be natural. But if they weren't natural, what were they? In the end, he decided to assume they were natural formations. There was no technology that he was aware of that would allow someone to manipulate solid rock in this way. Whatever had happened to the others in the bathyscaphe, what Markov had been able to determine about it, Altman was never told. Once quarantined, the bathyscaphe disappeared and was never seen again. No doubt Markov and his inner circle had analyzed it to death. Altman was eager to see the rest of the vid from Hennessy, but his request to Markov was met with silence. Now that the bathyscaphe was up, the floating compound was frantic with preparations to raise the artifact itself. It was impossible to have a conversation that didn't turn to the monolith lying down at the bottom of the crater, and people seemed both excited and incredibly nervous. Whatever it was, whatever was down there, could change everything, and they would be the first to come into contact with it. The signal had returned, but seemed to be broadcasting differently now, intermittently, on and off, in fairly regular bursts. Some researchers speculated it was a distress call, though who or what was in distress nobody dared guess. Perhaps it was a result of a falling piece of technical equipment, the artifact itself faulty or breaking down. It was, after all, very, very old, and many believed, Altman among them, that it was old enough that it couldn't possibly be of human origin, that the artifact was clear proof of alien life. If you'd seen it, he told Markov in his debriefing, you'd agree with me. There's nothing human about it. The pulse signal was now interfering with radios and vids, creating a static communication wave and fuzzing images. Often when he descended in the bathyscaphe, Altman was out of touch very quickly because of the interference, and stayed out of touch for a good part of the trip. He was piloting descents daily, with several members of Markov's inner circle, all of whom showed no signs of cracking. He questioned whomever he was with, trying to find out anything he could. Mostly they were closed-lipped, but every once in a while they let something slip. A scientist called him in from the hall when he was walking past the lab, and thinking he was someone else at first, began asking questions about a winch mechanism. Was it really enough? Would it lift the thing? And what about the cable? What sort of cable would you need for something like that? Altman played along as he could, finally admitted he didn't know what he was talking about. You're not Perkins? The scientist asked. Altman shook his head. Never mind, said the scientist, retreating quickly into his lab. Forget I said anything. Showalter, too, was almost as much on the outside as Altman, though he knew geophysics well enough that he was somehow consulted. Always just bits and pieces, Showalter confessed to Altman in a low voice over coffee. They think if they give me just a little, I won't be able to figure it out. That'd be true if it was just them, but their colleagues sometimes consult me as well. I know more than anybody realizes. And? Asked Altman. I think we're very close to bringing it up, said Showalter. Almost all the theoretical problems have been solved. A few more tests and they'll just be waiting for an okay. Ada had made friends with the medical team, even helping out informally when she was needed. And she was needed more and more. In the floating compound, Ada told him, reports of scientists and soldiers beset by insomnia and hallucinations were on the rise. According to Dr. Merck, she claimed, he's never seen anything like it. Violent incidents of all kinds are on the rise, nearly double what they were just a few months ago. The suicide rate has skyrocketed, and the assault rate has climbed considerably. It's a tense time, said Altman, playing devil's advocate, the role Ada would usually play. Maybe that's all it is. No, you were right, it's more than that, said Ada. Even Merck thinks so. There are signs of widespread paranoia, people having visions of dead relatives, and more people speaking in a trance-like state of convergence. Without being really able to explain what that meant exactly once they were themselves again. Everyone is on the verge of paranoia or panic. God damn it, you've got me thinking like you. Altman nodded. Then my non-scientific inquiry was right, he said. Everyone is on edge. Something is going on. What do you think it means? Ada asked him. What does it mean? Said Altman. If you ask me. It means we're fucked. Oh, you know what? I don't think I put this on loop. Let me make sure I do that so that it loops if we need it to. Okay. So, things are progressing. So they have brought up the first bathyscaphe. Now, the first bathyscaphe, as you may recall, did manage to take a sample of the marker before Dantec was brutally murdered. Now, it's already really bad that they brought this piece up. Because, if you recall, or I say recall, but like, I mean, how many people are going to have actually seen Dead Space Aftermath? So in Dead Space Aftermath, and I want to say also Dead Space Salvage, the comic series set after the events of the first game, both are basically about people finding chunks of the red marker. Right? So it's established in each of these that the way it's described in Dead Space Aftermath is that it's like a hologram, but I don't know what that means exactly. What they explain it to mean is that a chunk, like a piece of the marker, has all of the properties of the full marker. I don't know how that relates to holograms necessarily, but I'm not a scientist. And this is a problem because it means that a chunk of the marker can send out the exact same signal that the entire marker itself could send out. And now a piece of this marker is in the lab. So this can only mean good things. But Altman manages to retrieve it before anybody knows that it's there. Because everybody is a little bit too preoccupied with, you know, the dead people inside the fucking submersible to notice that, like, hey, they got a rock. He runs some tests on it, finds that it's similar to granite, but it's very dense and a very hard material, unlike anything on Earth. And now that they have the bathyscaphe, now that they know that there's something down there, because, you know, they took all sorts of, like, readings and recordings and everything of the damn thing, they're planning to bring it up. This is, of course, the worst idea anyone's ever had. This can only lead to bad things. But again, this is Dead Space. Going from bad to worse is just kind of par for the course. And more than that, Altman and Ada have been putting together all these connections with regards to like what's been going on with Dredger Corp, what's been going on with people in the area, with nightmares and insomnia and everything. And Ada is starting to come around on the idea that this marker is seemingly responsible for some pretty bad shit, actually. And bringing it up might be a bad idea. Do I have enough room for the rest of this line? No, I don't. And yet, what can they do, you know? Everyone really wants to bring this thing up, for the most part. And perhaps that, in and of itself, is a form of marker madness. Like, that's the whole thing, right? It's established in Dead Space 2, the signal that causes the dementia and the signal that seems to imbue people with knowledge of the markers all carried on the same signal. It whips people into a violent religious fervor over it by showing it visions of their dead relatives. And for others, it makes them think, oh, this could be the answer to all our problems. Also, hold on, I realize there is something that we need to talk about. We've gotten another, I don't know if this is our first like drop of this word, but convergence has come up. And if people are talking about convergence, then we're in a lot more trouble than we may have thought at first. So convergence. Fucking convergence. Okay. There is a number of reoccurring terms and phrases over the course of Dead Space. Convergence and make us whole are chief among them. Now, for the longest time, it wasn't really thought of, or it wasn't really known exactly what convergence was. The closest that we got was in Dead Space 2, when Tideman mentions all of the necromorphs and dead bodies surrounding the golden marker, as I tend to call it, triggering a convergence event. And then there's a big ol' inception horn and bodies start flying up into the air. In Dead Space 3, we get a full explanation as to what convergence is. Convergence is, in part, exactly what it sounds like. It's all of these dead bodies, all of these necromorphs converging, coming together, forming a new Brethren Moon. Brethren Moons, of course, being the malevolent, eldritch masses of dead flesh that are responsible for the markers and responsible for marker madness. The markers transmit the signal of the Brethren Moons across the galaxy and not only influence people to kill others in order to create the bodies needed to create new Brethren Moons, but also influence other people to make brand new fucking markers. Just starting the whole cycle again and again and again. Why they do this? Who fucking knows? They're fucking eldritch creatures. We have no frame of reference as to exactly what their motivations are. And who knows if we ever will, with whether or not we're going to get another Dead Space sequel. We gotta wait to see if the remake does well. I kind of hope it does well. I would like to see this story wrapped up. Anyways, that's chapter 42. Let's see what happens next. shall we? Chapter 43. Altman was on yet another descent, this time with a researcher by the name of Torquato? Torquato. I'm going to go with Torquato. Someone from Markov's inner circle. He had with him a simple black box, homemade, with a single knob on it and a needle readout. The technology was old enough that it could have been made in the 20th century. Tide Pool. The name's Tide Pod. He's candy. As they descended, Altman tried to make idle conversation to pass the time. You're what? He asked. Some kind of scientist? Torquato shrugged. You could call it that, he said. Geophysics? Asked Altman. Geology? Volcanology? Something more theoretical. It's hard to explain, claimed Torquato, and not very interesting. But Altman was interested. He was ascending into the heart of the crater with a man who was being deliberately vague. Something was up. So what brings you here today? He asked, trying to sound casual. A few measurements, said Torquato. What's the box about? Asked Altman. This, responded Torquato, pushing at the box with his thumb. Oh, it's nothing. A few more questions and Altman gave up. They descended in silence down to the artifact and held position just above it. Robotic units had dug out under its base and were well on the way to netting it, the net itself attached to a series of cables that would eventually be hooked to larger, stronger cables on the freighter. The artifact would be reeled in with the help of the nascent field of kinetic technology. It was to be secured and then brought through the water doors into the floating compound. Beside him, Torquato gave the single knob on his box a counterclockwise twist. The needle immediately came to life, engaging in a rhythmic and regular movement along its graph. Torquato grunted, jotted something down on his holopad. What is it? Asked Altman. Said Torquato. Did you say something? When Altman started to repeat the question, Torquato interrupted. Take the bathyscaphe lower, he said. How much lower? Halfway between the top of the object and its base, he said. Carefully, Altman nudged it down. The black box's needle, he saw, continued to bounce, but its rhythm and scope changed. That's good, said Torquato. Now, can you slowly circle around, staying just at this level? I can try, said Altman. He started moving the bathyscaphe slowly around the monolith, casting glances from time to time at the box. When Torquato noticed him looking, he cast him a withering look, and from then on shielded the readout with his hand. You're here to drive, he said. Nothing more. Look, buddy, said Altman. I'm not stealing any secrets here. I have no idea what that thing does. I'm just trying to pass the time. Torquato didn't bother to answer. Exasperated, Altman turned away, focusing on trying to bring the bathyscaphe within a few meters of the monolith without touching it. When he looked back, Torquato was still covering the readout with his hand. Asshole, he thought. Torquato's turn was different from that of the others, much more abrupt, little if any warning. One moment he was sitting there, shielding the black box's needle display with his hand, and the next he had attacked. How he'd undone the restraint on his leg, Altman hadn't been able to figure out at the time, though later he discovered it had been cut, whether by Torquato or someone else, he never could be certain. In a flash, Torquato was free, and that was all that mattered. Altman had tried to get the tranquilizer gun out and fire a dart, but Torquato had been too quick, and when he reached for it, he found the holster empty, the pistol aimed at him instead. He dived to the side, but the pistol had already fired, and there it was, dart sticking out of his arm. He reached down and with effort plucked it out. His tongue already felt thick in his mouth. Torquato was talking to him, he suddenly realized, though he was a little less clear on what he was saying. He blinked and Torquato blurred out of focus, only slowly coming back again. The man was speaking incomprehensibly, endlessly, about the necessity for convergence. Altman made an effort, bit the inside of his mouth until it bled, succeeded in focusing. You've been here again and again, just beside it, he said to Altman, stroking his cheek, yet you have felt nothing. Don't you hear it calling you? Won't you answer? When he regained consciousness, it was to find himself pressed up against the observation porthole, the bathyscaphe pushing up against the artifact with the monitor still running until it was tilted on end. There were repeated banging noises coming from somewhere, punctuated by long moments of silence. It's stuck, he heard Torquato's voice mutter, and then, I'm trying, I tell you, I'm trying. Trying to what? Altman wondered. The banging started again. Altman slowly pulled himself up, standing on the porthole. The cabin felt extraordinarily warm, stuffy. He scaled to the side of the console and stood on it. The oxygen recirculator had been disabled, but was nothing but a mass of tangled metal, sparks flying off of it. He was careful not to touch it. No wonder the air felt stuffy. How long had he been out? He looked down at the console until his eyes found the chronometer. It, too, had stopped. The ladder leading to the hatch was directly above him, horizontal along the ceiling, and he could see Torquato's feet sticking out of the passage. The banging started up again. Oh shit, Altman realized, his limbs instantly going heavy. He's trying to open the hatch. He's trying to flood the bathyscaphe. He climbed onto the sideways chair, nearly fell when it swiveled. There was a brief groan, and for a moment he thought it was going to come unbolted from the deck, but it held. Carefully, he put both feet on the chair back and stood. From there, he could almost reach the fixed metal ladder. He steadied himself, reached it as far as he could, but his fingers just grazed it. He'd have to leap up, hope that his fingers caught the rung and held it the first time, so that he wouldn't come down with a crash and alert Torquato. The banging started again, Torquato screeching along with it. Altman jumped, caught the rung. He flailed his leg up, managed to get his ankle around the side rail of the ladder as well. The banging stopped. He hung there, motionless, hoping Torquato wouldn't turn around. "It's stuck!" he shouted, apparently a nobody. "I'm trying, I tell you!" Holding onto the ladder, Altman tilted his head back until he could see Torquato there, upside down. He was lying flat in the passage, a metal bar in one hand, a strut, maybe, something stolen from the remains of the oxygen recirculator. His knuckles were bloody, and Altman could see symbols like those on the artifact, painted here and there along the passage in blood. Torquato tugged on the wheel, then gave a little cry of frustration. He raised the bar and started striking the hatch again, at the hinge. The pressure was too great, Altman realized with relief. Unless he loosened the hinge or blew the hatch from the control panel, the seal might hold. Much more worrisome, though, was the lack of air. Torquato stopped, breathing heavily. "A cleansing," he was muttering. "Yes, a cleansing. Start again, new and fresh." He began pounding again. Carefully, Altman started along the ladder, back into the passage. As he got farther up, he had to bend his arms, pull himself up closer to the ladder so as not to brush Torquato's back. By the time Torquato stopped again, Altman was hanging directly over him, their bodies less than a foot away from each other. Altman could smell the man's sour sweat. He held his breath, staring at the ladder a few inches from his face, the muscles in his arms starting to cramp. Torquato kept muttering to himself, laughing softly under his breath. Altman heard the sound of him scrabbling at the hatch, the cry of frustration. Then the pounding began again. He let go of the ladder and pushed off it hard at the same time, crashing down onto Torquato's back. It hurt like hell. He tried in the confined space to scramble around to face him, but Torquato was trying to get up too, and for a moment his face and chest were pressed against the ladder. With a shout, he pushed down as hard as he could, and Torquato collapsed underneath him. He started to turn around again, knocking his shoulder against the ladder, and made it this time. Torquato was half turned over now, and groping for the metal bar, which had fallen and was under him. Altman grabbed his head by the hair and brought it down hard. Torquato was bellowing now, struggling, trying to slip back and in and out of the passage. Altman wrapped his legs around him and held on, trying to keep him there, slamming his face into the floor again. Torquato had the bar now and was trying to get it up, but his arm was still pinned beneath him. He turned his head as far as he could, trying to look at Altman, and Altman saw his collapsed cheekbone and orbit, the blood that was washing over his eye. He slammed his head down again, and then a second time, until the bar slipped from Torquato's fingers and his body went slack. Altman lay there on top of him for a while, holding him by the hair, trying to catch his breath. Knocking against the walls, he turned Torquato the rest of the way over, face up. His face was a mess, the nose and cheekbone broken and in a pulp. He held his ear close to his mouth. His breathing was shallow, but it was still there. Now what? Thought Altman. What do I do with him? He could tie him up, as he had done with Hendricks. There was always a chance he would break free. There was a bigger problem, the lack of oxygen. With the oxygen recirculator broken, he probably didn't have enough air to make it to the surface for one person, let alone two. Am I a killer? Altman wondered. Am I the kind of person who is willing to kill someone so as to stay alive himself? He ran it through his mind again, considered other alternatives, but he couldn't come up with anything. It was either Torquato or him. Torquato, he told himself, would have died anyway if he'd gotten his way and managed to open the hatch, so the choice was either both of them dead or just one of them dead. He looked at the bloody face below him. He'd done that. Maybe he'd had no choice. But in any case, he'd done it, was responsible for it, and was about to be, he realized, responsible for more. He reached out and put his hands around Torquato's throat. It was sticky with blood. He let his hands lie there, then very gently began to squeeze. At first, he thought it would be easy, and that Torquato would simply slip from unconsciousness to death without waking. But after a moment, Torquato's eyes suddenly sprang open. Altman squeezed harder. Torquato's arms began to flail and shake, striking Altman's shoulder and arms. He arched his back. knocking Altman into the wall of the passage, but Altman held on, squeezing tighter. In the last moment before he died, a light came into Torquado's undamaged eye that Altman couldn't help but see. Human. Pleading. He closed his own eyes to it and turned his head to the side. Gradually, he felt Torquado's movements slow and stop. When he finally opened his eyes again, Torquado's eyes had rolled back in their sockets. He was dead. He dragged himself out of the passage, climbed down the wall and onto the console. There, he reversed the screws, bringing the bathscaff backward and away from the artifact. It slowly righted itself, Torquado's body spilling out of the hatch passage and onto the floor. Altman climbed off the console into the chair to start the bathscaff rising. The lead pellet release was jammed, the panel all around it scarred from where Torquado had dented it. The craft started to rise, pellets slowly dribbling out, but not as fast as he'd hoped. Chances were he'd reach a certain water density and then the craft would stop moving entirely and he'd hang there, suspended, slowly dying. He recorded an SOS message and then sent it to Loop and Broadcast, asking them to come for the bathscaff, to make it rise as quickly as possible. Whether they'd get the message soon enough, he didn't know. He recorded another message for Ada, telling her he loved her and that he was sorry, just in case he didn't make it. It was getting very warm. He wasn't getting enough air. He wondered if the best thing to do was to go to sleep. He'd use less air that way. He contemplated getting down on the floor of the submarine, thinking the air might be better down there. But he just stayed, slumped in his chair, staring at Torquado's remains. And then, suddenly... Oh, fuck! Shit, Christ! Thank you, Aaron Black. That's one of my favorite newer Mortal Kombat characters. Thank you for the follow. That scared the shit out of me. We're at a very spooky part of the book. You can't be doing that. But thank you. I hope you enjoy your time here on the Sharkstream. And then, suddenly, he saw Torquado's hand move. Impossible, he thought. He's dead. He swiveled his chair around so that he could see him better, watching carefully. No, he was dead. He wasn't moving. How could he? And then the hand moved again. Hello, Altman, Torquado said. Go back to being dead, Altman said to him. It's not as easy as that, said Torquado. I need you to understand something first. Understand what? This, said Torquado and leapt forward. Torquado flew up on him, choking him. He tried to pry his hands off, but they were digging too firmly into his neck. He latched his own hands onto Torquado's neck, squeezing with all he had. Then he blacked out. He came conscious to find his hands around the neck of a corpse. It was rigid and cold. Had been dead a very long time. What is going on? He wondered. He tried to stand up to get away from the corpse, but couldn't. He moved his fingers away and rolled off, lying just beside it. He hoped he was close to the surface, but there was no way to tell from here. Suddenly, he saw something strange. A woman. She looked a lot like Ada, though it wasn't her. It was obvious when he looked close, but maybe it was her mother, back when he had first met her, before she had cancer. But that's impossible, he thought. Ada's mother is dead. I'm hallucinating again, he thought, just like with Torquado. Hello, Michael, she said. Aren't you dead? He asked. How can I be dead if I'm here with you? For a moment he wanted to simply accept what she was saying, but then found resistance welling up within him. Who are you, really? He asked. Why am I hallucinating you? Ada's mother didn't answer either question. I've come to give you a message, she said. About the marker. What's the marker? You know what it is, she said. You've come near it again and again, but somehow you've resisted it. She crossed her index and middle fingers, held her hand toward him. Tale of the devil, he said. The artifact, you mean? She nodded. You need to forget about it. The marker is dangerous. Above all, you need to leave it where you found it. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, said Altman. What do I have to do with the marker? Not just you, she said, and spread her arms wide. You. Whatever choices are made will affect all of you. She cocked her head in a manner very similar to the way Ada often did. A tremendous pressure built rapidly in his head, then it was gone. What's the message? Asked Altman. Convergence is death, she said. You must not give in to the marker. You must not allow it to begin convergence. What does that mean, convergence? It means you shall finally begin from the new beginning. The beginning of what? And just me? She again spread her arms wide. You, all of you, she said. Then, for a moment, she seemed almost like Ada in a way that he found very disturbing. I love you, Michael, Ada's mother said. I'm counting on you. Please help me stop it. Please don't fail. And then, as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. He tried to get up, fell back. The world around him was growing dark, as if through a black veil. Slowly it grew darker, still, and then, suddenly, it was gone. Recap time. Okay. So quite a bit just happened. So we met a new man's. Torquato is how his name is spelled. So Torquato seemed to be all right for most of the trip, and then at some point just fucking lost it. Like, just went fucking bonkers. Now, the whole time that he had this weird black box instrument that seemed to be taking some kind of reading, based on the way that the needle behaved when they were near the marker, it seemed like it probably had something to do with the pulse signal. Now, at first, it seemed like perhaps this guy was another person who was going to basically be resistant to the marker's influence. But then he wasn't. He, like, super wasn't. And he managed to get a hold of Altman's tranq gun and got him with it. Now, it could have killed Altman. But he was a little bit preoccupied trying to open the bathyscaphe. Now, it's pretty clear that he was hallucinating someone. We never get any sort of scene from Torquato's perspective, so we don't know exactly who he was seeing, but he was talking to somebody the whole time, based on what Altman could hear him saying. And whoever it was basically trying to get him to open the bathyscaphe, killing them both and preventing them from doing anything with the marker. Excuse me. Now, Altman manages to regain consciousness and kicks Torquato's fucking ass. But uh-oh. Now, this is a kind of a common conflict in stories that either take place in sort of like underwater locations or space locations. Like, this is something that happened in Danny Boyle's Sunshine, which, by the way, if you've never seen Danny Boyle's Sunshine, I highly recommend Danny Boyle's Sunshine. It's a pretty fucking good movie. But a lot of times those sorts of conflicts come down to sort of a question of like, okay, we don't have enough oxygen for everybody present to make the return trip. And it starts being a question of, okay, how do we decide whose life is worth less than the others? The question is a little bit easier for Altman to answer here because he's already kind of gone halfway by beating the shit out of Torquato. And it's really just a question of going the extra 10% and just fucking killing him. I was told I look like one of the characters when they do that thing. They do what thing? And which character? In Danny Boyle's Sunshine? Dan Boyle Sunshine? In Sunshine? Sunshine? Do you perhaps know which character? Is it perhaps Cillian Murphy? Is it perhaps Captain America? Why am I suddenly forgetting his name? Chris something. Chris. He's a Chris, right? Chris Evans, that's it. I remembered. It's fine. Perhaps Chris Evans? Perhaps. Yes, sure. I will one day tweet the photo. I just sort of went for Cillian Murphy and Chris Evans right off the bat because they're the only they're the only people in that movie whose actors' names I know. Obviously, I don't know what you look like, so I can't more accurately assess which character it might be. But yeah, like I said, this is a little bit of an easier decision for Altman to make because obviously Torquato's already half dead as it is. We might as well just, just give him a little nudge. Give him a little nudge over that edge there. So Altman do a murder. Altman do big murder. He fucking 9S's this guy. I've been playing a lot of Nier Automata recently, so when they described him choking the life out of Torquato, I'm just like, oh yeah, just like what 2B did that one time. And cosplayers like to reenact at conventions, and nobody involved has any horny intentions whatsoever, I'm sure. So Altman do a murder, but just because Altman do a murder, and thus there's not as many people using oxygen, doesn't mean that there isn't still a very notable deficiency of oxygen. And Altman starts having some trouble. He starts feeling very lethargic. He records an SOS message. He records a goodbye message to Ada in the event that he doesn't make it. But being deprived of oxygen, it would appear, brings down whatever mental defenses he has against the marker signal to a point where he starts hallucinating. Now, something that you maybe don't get from just listening to me read the book is that, okay, so up until this point, let me go ahead and spell this out. So obviously, when a person is talking, quotation marks. There we go. So whenever a person is talking, their dialogue is rendered inside quotation marks. Obviously, is fucking writing 101. Right? Now, an important distinction that they use to show a character who is a hallucination talking is that they are rendered in italics. I can't actually type in italics in OBS, but I'm just going to put down italics. Basically, so a common thing in writing dialogue is that a lot of times italics will be used to show that a character is thinking particular dialogue. So the fact that hallucinations talk in italics is sort of supposed to be like an additional layer of showing that like it's all in that person's head. Now, the first thing that Isaac starts hallucinating is he starts hallucinating Torquato moving and speaking again. Isaac Altman, excuse me. No, that would be a weird way to put it. Now, it's a hell of a thing when the person that you're pretty sure you've just murdered starts moving and talking to you again. But, and this is what I'm talking about when I say that, like, there are certain things that you don't really get if you're just listening to me read the book versus if you're reading it yourself. So when Torquato starts talking, it's rendered the same way any other hallucination is rendered. It's in italics. But Torquato has one line just before he attacks the hallucination Torquato has one line before he starts attacking Altman, where it's rendered in quotation marks. Which, as far as, like, text-based jump scare, is pretty effective, where it's just, like, it's kind of what, so, like, obviously one of the things in Dead Space is just, like, Dead Space games render out hallucinatory episodes and stuff like that, and you're not sure if, like, necessarily what you're seeing is real, or if your character is fucking losing it. This is a pretty good substitute for that, text-wise, where it's just like, wait, up until this point, every hallucination has used italics to convey their speech, but this is in quotation marks. And then, now, this is obviously immediately undone by saying that Altman is choking out a corpse in retaliation, which is what he started doing to the hallucination just after it started attacking him. But in the moment, it's this weird sort of like, wait, shit, is he actually alive? Which is actually incredibly effective. And I have to applaud BK Evanson for that. That was a good stylistic choice to do that sort of like bait and switch there. Now, Altman's second hallucination okay, that's too many letters. I understand. No, that's not funny. All right. So his second hallucination is Ada's mom. Continuing the whole trend of the marker making you hallucinate people that you know are dead. So first it's like, oh, Torquato, the guy he just killed, fresh in his mind. And then it's Ada's mom. Now, Ada's mom, again, acting as the voice for the marker, playing hard to get. Marker Chan doesn't like you or anything, but Baka, it's not like it wants you to bring about glorious convergence. Idiot. And again, it's... I've talked about this before, where it's like early Dead Space content was very, very seemingly very wishy-washy about exactly what the markers wanted. Because you had people who were like slaughtering others, people who were creating necromorphs, wanting to free the hive mind, and it seemed like the marker was there to hold off the necromorphs. But it also seemed to be sending out the signal that created them. it's sending out the signal that creates necromorphs is also something that would go on to be supported by future Dead Space games. And it's just super unclear. And again, it's eldritch beings, vast intelligences that we cannot possibly even begin to fathom their motivations and their goals. But again, I think it's just tsundere. So then Altman passes out. Because of course he passes out. He's fucking running out of goddamn oxygen. Okay. I think I got one more chapter in me. We're going to need to stop mid-part, but we will of course pick this up next week. Wait, how long is this chapter? Yeah, I got one more chapter in me. Zip. He woke with an oxygen mask strapped to his face, surrounded by a series of seemingly identical men dressed in white, their faces covered by surgeons' masks. "He made it," one of them said. "He's alive." "Any evidence of brain damage?" asked another. Altman tried to speak, but couldn't get his tongue around the words. One of the doctors put a hand on his shoulder. It was Stevens, he realized. He could recognize him by his eyes. "Just relax," he said. "You're lucky to be alive." He closed his eyes, swallowed. And then a terrible thought hit him. What if this was just another hallucination? He tried to move his arms but couldn't. He opened his eyes, looking desperately around. "He's confused," he heard one of them say. "Disoriented. He doesn't know where he is." What was it she had said? You must not give in to the marker. You must not allow it to begin convergence. He had to tell them. "The marker," he whispered. Markov leaned in close. "The marker," he repeated. "The marker," said Markov. "What marker? He's talking nonsense. Give him another shot." Altman shook his head, or tried. Whether his head moved or not, he couldn't say. Either it didn't move or they ignored him. He watched one of them fill the syringe and prime the needle without being able to do anything about it. He tried to speak, made instead a gurgling, inarticulate cry. "It'll be okay," said Stevens, patting his arm. "Don't worry, Altman. We're here for you." Then he felt a prick as the needle punctured his flesh. His arm burned a moment, then went numb. The men in white were there for a moment longer, then they slowly blurred and ran together and finally disappeared entirely. When he came conscious again, the room was empty, except for 3 men. Stevens, Markov, and another man from Markov's inner circle, whose name he didn't know. He was as large as Markov, but thicker, with a brutal, flat face. They stood to one side of the bed, speaking in whispers impossible for Altman to make out. Stevens was the first to notice he was awake. He gestured at him and whispered something. The other 2 stopped talking. In unison, all 3 moved closer and stared down at him. "Altman," said Markov, "still alive. You seem to lead a charmed life." Altman started to respond, but Markov held a finger up to stop him. He reached down, removed Altman's oxygen mask. "Are you feeling up to speaking?" asked Markov. "I think so," Altman said. His voice sounded like it no longer belonged to him, or belonged to someone that was him, but much older. "You remember Stevens," said Markov. "And this is Officer Cracks." Hold on. Cracks? I want to go ahead and just point out that that's spelled Krax. Officer Crack. We're going to continue. Altman nodded. "It's very simple," said Markov. "I want you to tell me everything." He did, starting with the moment when Torquato had suddenly attacked and moving through to his hallucinations. "Tell us more about these hallucinations," says Cracks. Meme culture be like. "Doesn't matter," asked Altman. "They were just hallucinations." "It does matter," said Stevens. "Indeed, it matters a great deal." So Altman, too, tried to argue or make up a lie. So Altman, too tired to argue or make up a lie, told them. When he was done, the 3 men withdrew to the far side of the room, started whispering again. Altman closed his eyes. He was on the verge of falling back asleep when they returned. For a moment, they just stared at him. Stevens started to say something, but Markov touched his arm and stopped him. "I want you to tell Stevens everything from here on out," he said. "Any dreams, hallucinations, anything at all out of the ordinary. You contact Stevens right away." "This is crazy," said Altman. No, said Markov, it isn't. And then they were gone, leaving Altman behind to brood. He felt more confused and apprehensive than ever. But a few minutes later, the door opened, and a distraught Ada rushed in, and he had other things on his mind. Blue Skidoo, we can't chew. All right. So, short chapter to close things out. So Altman has managed to survive his trip back to the laboratory. Despite the... Mitty? Hello? Child? You gonna go hop up on the computer? Mitty, hop. My cat is here. Give me a moment. Mimmy. Mimmy, hello. How are you? Hello. Hello. Mitty, you have such a weird neck. Why is your neck like that? My cat Calamity is very large in body, but very small in head. And has, like, a weirdly long neck. I'm not saying that, like, she's half cat, half giraffe or anything, but, like, she'll compress it into, like, the rest of her in most cases, but then, like, when she sees something that, like, really catches her attention, she's like, whoop. It's very funny, and she's very cute, and I love her a lot. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. Altman's okay. Now, Altman has been playing a lot of his investigations in this pretty close to the chest. He has been sneaking around, keeping secrets, you know, the necro flesh, the chunk of the marker, all that good stuff. But I guess there's just something about severe oxygen deprivation that really just takes the desire to lie out of a person. So when confronted by, you know, Markov, Stevens, and Cracks, he decides he's just gonna go ahead and tell them everything. Which, like, you know, he might as well. And when confronted with the idea that, hey, maybe you should talk to a fucking psychologist about the things you're experiencing, is just like, what? No, I don't need therapy. That's exactly the sort of thing a person who does need therapy would say. And, like, you know, the folks from Dredger Corp and these, like, vague government officials or whatever, military intelligence, they've been pretty obstructive so far. Not really caring about the consequences of what they're doing. But at the same time, given everything that's happened so far, Dantec, Hennessy, Tanner, Hammond to a smaller extent, I guess, fucking Hendrix, not to mention literally everyone that was mentioned at the end of part 4 that has been, like, losing their minds and killing people and committing suicide. No, Altman, I think it's actually genuinely in everyone's best interest that maybe you share the hallucinations and the dreams that you're having with a fucking psychologist. Like, okay, these guys aren't super trustworthy or anything, but like, read the fucking room, my guy. Jesus Christ. And that's where our chapter ends. And that's where we're going to end the stream today. As I said, it's a bit of a shorter one today just because I had a lot that I did today. And I'm kind of tired. And I want to go ahead and call it a night a little bit earlier today. I want to thank everybody for coming by the stream. I hope you all had a good time. If you enjoyed the stream, you can subscribe here on Twitch. We have special emotes at tiers. I mean, really just the one tier, actually. It's just the one tier, actually. Hold on. What was I talking about? You can also follow me on Twitter at sane_intolerant or on YouTube at youtube.com/saneintolerant, where I post all the streams after they happen. Upcoming, or wait, no, first art. This lovely PNG tuber model here, this sexy boy I got right here, this was done by my good friends Audrey and B of Team Catpull, who you can find at Team Catpull on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Don't email them yet, as far as I know. You can ask them first, I guess, if you can. But last I heard, don't email them. They do fantastic work, though. I highly recommend checking their stuff out. This very, very helpful chalkboard background here was made by my lovely wife, Natalie, whose work you can find. She's been drawing again. It's great. I love her art. It's so good. But you can find her on Twitter at GhostieNaps. That's GHOSTIENAPS. It is right there on screen. She is lovely and literally one of the funniest people I know. Probably the funniest. Like, definitely top funniest person I know. Natalie. Absolute, just a riot. And I just love her a lot. Upcoming streams. Wednesday. We should be having Molly on again for Skyward Sword, I believe. So, hope you'll tune in for that. We finished the Desert Temple, so I think we're starting in on, if not the second half of the game, at the very least, Act 2. The Chipwrecked. I don't fucking know. The Squeakquel. Thursday, we will be continuing God of War 3. Friday, I believe, I'm going to have Team Capel back on for some more, what's the word I'm looking for? Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, Mirror of Fate. And we'll be back next Saturday to finish off part 5 of Dead Space Martyr. And it might be another short stream, just so that I don't stop mid-part again. So we'll probably finish off part 5 and probably not move into part 6. But I hope you'll tune in for that. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I want to thank everybody for coming by the stream. I hope you all had a good time, and I will see you next time on the Sharkstream. Same shark time, same shark channel. Take care.